It is these moments that define us, what we do in the struggle, what we do when things are hard and messy and involve doing what's right and not what is wrong, clearly wrong, like taking money from the NRA to uphold these laws outdated by hundreds of years. They allow for repeated killings of children. Thank you, students, and everyone here for standing up and saying no more. Because we know it's hard, and we know they will twist our words and laugh at us and lie and lie and lie and lie and lie. How do they sleep at night? You are killing children.
Amy Schumer there in Los Angeles today, part of this March for Our Lives movement happening across the country. You know, it was during one of her movie showings of her movie Trainwreck a couple of years ago when in Louisiana when a gunman barged in that movie theater and just opened fire. She's someone who's been absolutely outspoken on ending gun violence in this country. I'm Brooke Baldwin here in Washington, D.C., and I have Congressman Ted Deutsch with me now. Parkland is in his home district, and Congressman, I know you have gotten to know a lot of these students over the past couple of weeks. In fact, the last time you and I spoke, we were standing together in front of Douglas High School the day after the shooting, and it was a pretty emotional moment. And I just between that day, Congressman, and now, and standing here at this rally, what are you thinking?
Well, Brooke, remember in the days after this terrible shooting, these student survivors really got together and they rose up and they said they wanted to start a movement. They said nobody should have to experience what they've experienced. They said that no student should have to go to school in fear. And over the past weeks, what we've seen is these students come together, not just the Stoneman Douglas students and the kids from South Florida, but they've come together with students from Chicago and Los Angeles and Washington and Baltimore and Newtown. And they've really built a movement that you saw on full display here with massive crowds here and all across the country. They've found their voice, they've found their defining issue, they're demanding change, and America will have no choice but to listen to them.
You know, I think of you also, of course, part of our CNN debate, the town hall that week, where it was raw and emotional, and, you know, that was just the week after the shooting, and you talk about these young voices, and I agree with you. I think that is the biggest difference, and that is the change they hope they seek. But what do you think has been the biggest difference since that night at our debate and this moment here in Washington?
Well, we're now 5.5 weeks after this horrific shooting at Stoneman Douglas. And I mean, Brooke, as we've discussed, as people have talked about, typically what happens historically, and unfortunately there's a history of these terrible events. And there's a bit of publicity, a lot of discussion. We have some moments of silence, lots of talk of thoughts and prayers, and then we move on to the next issue. What these students have done is they have refused to allow us to move on. They have forced this issue into the center of America's political agenda, and that's what's different. That's why we're still talking about it. That's why we're after this event. Now, when they encouraged today, they encouraged everyone here to go out to see their members of Congress over the next 2 weeks when we're home in our districts. That's very powerful. That's going to set the stage for real change.
You were in that sort of infamous meeting with President Trump some weeks ago where he was sitting around with Democrats, you know, sort of saying yes to ideas you all had as far as gun reform is concerned, and then over the course of the following days, had a meeting with the NRA, his tune changed. Now, that said, you know, we ended the week here in Washington with him ordering the DOJ to have a look and ban these bump stocks, pushing Congress to, you know, on the NICS database, background checks. What's your impression of the president on this?
Well, let me just be clear about something, Brooke. When we sat in the White House, The things that he expressed interest in doing, universal background checks, raising the age to buy a gun to 21, ensuring that domestic abusers can't buy guns, those aren't, I just need to be clear, those aren't Democratic ideas. They are almost universally supported by Democrats and Republicans alike. The other thing he said that day is he looked at my colleagues and told them to not be afraid of the NRA. So as I tweeted yesterday, the president says he's going to ban bump stocks. He should also remember he shouldn't be afraid of the NRA, and he should go back to where he was in that meeting and demand universal background checks. And after today, it should be easier for him to do it. These students, the power of the voices here today, are going to force change. This is one where he ought to get out in front of this, because if not, these students, it made very clear, anyone who doesn't support these issues, they're just going to plow through. And that's what they're going to do. The president has an opportunity to go back to where he was, to shut out the NRA, to make this about saving lives and not about the interests of the gun industry. And I hope he does. Look, I don't know. I'm not foolish enough to think that he's watching this thinking, well, now's my time to do the right thing. That doesn't mean that he shouldn't hear this. And I know there were marches back home in South Florida, not too far from where he is, and they probably marched by Mar-a-Lago. And I hope he was paying attention, because things are changing. The debate is changing. We need to take action, and we need to do it now.
They did put out the statement. Let me just read one line. We applaud the many courageous young Americans exercising their First Amendment rights today. Congressman Ted Deutsch, thank you so much. I appreciate your voice here in Washington. And coming up,